So we are on step number 12. You want the exterior main body front right side up. All right, so to make sure that you have the front and not the back, the front is the one that's a little bit shorter. So with that right side up, first we're going to use the pattern piece to mark the snap placement. And you'll just mark where the center of the snap should be. Okay, and then take the washer, mark the 2 prong placements, and then use the seam ripper. All right, and then insert the prongs of your snap into the 2 holes that you just made. Put the washer on the back, and again, I always like to press my snaps open. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. Okay, and we are going to assemble this in the same manner that we used to assemble the flap. So this is the front, and we will place the zipper. I'm going to fold this actually so I can find the center. I'm going to do the same here. Okay, so centered right side down, and I want my zipper closing to the left. Again, as somebody pointed out, if you are left-handed, you might want it the other way. So you would make your flap the opposite direction, and then you would have your zippers closing to the right. Okay, now we're only going to pin the exterior zipper tab to the exterior bottom main, whatever I call it, main body. Okay, so 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to first stitch just the tab to the exterior. So right until I get to that seam where the zipper and the zipper tab are attached, and then I'll back stitch. Fold the lining tab back out of the way. I'm going to move the zipper out of my way. Right now I'm only sewing along the length of the zipper. So I'll stop right when I get to the zipper tabs. Trim threads. All right, and then stitch from the seam where the tab is attached to the zipper to the edge of the front main body only. All right, so now, much like the tab or the flap construction, now I'm going to place the lining front main body front, lining main body front. I actually changed the name of these pieces or just before this version of the pattern that I'm working on right now, and it's definitely throwing me off. So I'm right now pinning the lining body, main body front to the top of the zipper. And you want to make sure that the two lining panels are lined up with each other. Or I'm sorry, the two body panels should be lined up. Right sides together with the zipper sandwich in between. Right now I'm sewing along that first tab only, the lining tab, to the lining main body front. Okay, and now I'll fold the exterior tab back down, and I'm going to sew along the existing stitching from where you attach the zipper to the exterior. And I'm stitching through the exterior, the zipper, and the lining. Okay. Now we're going to press these panels both away from the zipper, wrong sides together. These panels are pressed away from the zipper, wrong sides together. I'm going to increase my stitch length to 4, and I'm going to top stitch beneath the zipper only, not across where the zipper tabs are. And remember, when you're back stitching there, since this is visible, you want to keep it neat. I try to stitch over the same stitches that are already there. Okay, step number 15, which must be confusing a little bit, I think, to some people, but it makes sense to me. So if this changes at all, at this point I don't plan on it changing, but it may. So we are right now with the exterior main body back, right side up. Place the assembled main body front panels with the zipper exterior side down on top, matching the zipper to the top raw edge. Oh, maybe that's where so right now I want to match all the edges, and I do not want to sew the zipper though. So I'm folding the lining back out of the way, and I'm going to pin together down the sides. I'm going to take out the words, I think, matching the zipper, because I think that that is what is confusing. Across the bottom. Okay, and now we're going to sew the sides and the bottom only using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This can be difficult right at the beginning since you can't see. So I'm going to go in and just trim that tab to be even. All right, 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you want to use your shorter stitch length for the assembly parts. And this should be just alongside the fleece. Fold my tabs back out of the way. The lining tabs, that is. Okay, so now I just sewed the two exterior parts together, and I'm going to go right in here and trim the seam allowances along the sides and bottom down to 1/8 of an inch. And just really make sure that you have the entire lining folded back out of the way while you do this. Okay, and now I'm going to place the lining right side together with the lining main body front. So I'm doing exactly the same thing, but with the lining pieces. So the way this is attached right now, it's almost like two separate bags coming together, and then you just tuck the lining into the exterior. Okay, and I'm actually going to sew the lining pieces together using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So this will be easier to sew from this side. Fold the exterior back out of the way. Okay, and then the last side. And again, the tops are all open. You are not sewing along the top zipper here. Okay, now I'm going to trim those seam allowances on the lining down as well to about an eighth of an inch. Chair is awful squeaky. All right, now step number 16 is boxing the corners. So what I like to do is place my hand inside of the bag and flatten the bottom seam and flatten the side seam. And you bring them together so that the two seams are lined up. It works well if you fold one seam this way and one seam that way and they kind of nest together. So just match those up, and then with it flat like that, you will sew together the exterior using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. See how that is flat, and then you sew all the way across. And then I'm trimming the seam, or trimming the seam allowances off as I go. So again, I stick my hand inside the bag and flatten the bottom and flatten the sides, and then bring those two seams together so that they line up. I'll fold one seam allowance on the side towards one direction and the bottom towards a different direction, and then with it flat, use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Let me make sure that's lined up right. Okay. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing on the lining, but I will use a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now that all of our corners are boxed, you're going to turn the main panels right sides out. So I'm going to turn the exterior right side out and then tuck the lining down inside the exterior. So I'm pressing out the corners well to make sure that they're boxed properly. And as you can see, the sides, or the bottom seam and the side seam line up where that corner is sewn. I'll tuck the lining down inside, press the corners, Okay, and now I will line up the side seams. And fold in half. And I'm going to pin or clip because I'm going to baste this closed. So when I line up the side seams, I just turn the seam on the lining is going to the left and the seam on the exterior is going to the right, and then they nest together. And then I fold them in as such. Okay, and I just want to make sure that's all actually lined up properly. I have threads everywhere. Okay, so with this nice and flat, I'm just going to use like less than 1/4 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch if you can. If it needs to be a little bit more to make sure you catch it all, just make sure it's like less than 1/4 of an inch, but we will use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance when we sew this to the flap. So just make sure it's less than that. Okay, so I just basted all of the layers together. When you press this, you can press the bottom flat so that it doesn't poke out like that. That's so cute. Okay, so now you will take your flap, and I actually, once I pressed this, I opened it up and I basted around the edges. So I basted the lining and the exterior together right here. And I used, again, less than 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So unzip your zipper and turn the whole flap inside out. Okay, so with your flap inside out, put the assembled main body inside the flap, right sides together, so the exterior sides together, with the back of the main body facing the zipper side of the flap. So this is the front of the main body, the back of the main body is the side without the zipper and without the snap, and you want that to be facing the zipper side of the flap. All right, and even though this is all squished up in there, you really just want to be able to match up with the flap around the main body. You want this part to be straight across. And you can use a lot of pins or clips on this part to make sure everything is held together properly. Seems a little weird when you're assembling it, like it's not fitting right, but and you want to make sure that that flap is or that the side of the main body next to the zipper tabs is all the way up into the corner of the flap. All right, and when you sew this, you may have to pull the zipper pull out of the way. So you just have to reach up inside there. Wait, do I have this right? Yes. Okay. So I'm actually going to scooch that down now, since I will start sewing on this side. Okay, so just take your time and make sure that you get this nice and flat, and that the zipper is nice and flat inside there, and that there's no like lumps or gaps or puckers in your fabric. Okay, so now I'm going to sew this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and I am sewing through the flap and along the top of the zipper of the main body. So this is kind of, this part only is kind of a lot of layers. And that's why it's important to cut that fleece back out of the seam allowance. All right, when you get close to the zipper pull, just reach up inside and move it down. Okay, and I'm going to just, I'm not going to trim that seam allowance, but I'm going to trim back a few of these loose threads so that they are not exposed inside of my pocket. That's the flap, has a separate pocket. Okay, so now pull everything right side out through the flap zipper. Okay, you'll want to make sure, I lost my, okay, make sure that you press these corners out well. Okay, and now I'm going to go to the iron and just really press this nice and flat, and press this side nice and flat, because then we're going to top stitch along there. And if you see any stray threads or anything poking out, just go ahead and trim those off. Alright, so just a couple lines of stitching that we'll be doing here. We are going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch above this zipper. And this stitching is visible on the back of the clutch. So keep that in mind, that your thread color in the bobbin is something that looks nice with the fabric. And make sure you use a heavier needle I think my needle is a size 16 for this, just to make sure that it goes through all the layers. And see, the stitching shows on the back side, so. And the next line of stitching will also show on the back. So again, just make sure you're using a color that coordinates or looks okay. And this line of stitching will be 1/4 of an inch above the connector. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that, even though I'm not normally an eyeballer. But you could definitely like draw a line on with your invisible or disappearing marker. Okay, now let's zip this zipper up, and your clutch should fold down directly above the where the interfacing or the firm stabilizer is sewn in there. So the line of stitching I just did runs directly along the top of the bag. And there's the completed clutch. All right, let's make the wrist strap. So I have my 13-inch long by 2-inch wide piece of fabric that is interfaced. First, you will press it in half wrong sides together to create a center crease, and then unfold, and then fold each of the long raw edges into the center crease and press, and then fold in half again. So now all of the long raw edges are enclosed in the center, and it's 1/2 inch wide, 13 inches long. So you'll slip the lobster clip, swivel clip, onto the strap, and then without twisting anything, bring the two short edges together and then unfold them. See, I match up the two short edges and then I unfold it together so that I can make sure nothing gets twisted in the process. Okay, so now the two raw short edges are right sides together, and I am going to sew that using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I press that seam open. You can take it to the iron and press it, or just finger press it, and then refold. So the whole strap is now folded. Okay, and now starting on the edge where the two sides come together, so like the open side, I guess, and I start near that seam, we're going to top stitch all the way around this wrist strap. Back stitch a few stitches at first, and I'm using a stitch length of 4. And then as you get to the swivel clip, you'll just slide it out of the way. It's helpful to make sure that when you adjust that your needle is in a down position so that nothing slides. And then after this, I'll also do, I'll make a crossbody strap. So when I get back to where I started stitching, just back stitch again to secure that. Trip all the threads. Trim, trip. I was thinking snip and trim at the same time. Okay, and now we'll do the same top stitching along the other side. So I just start in the same area where I did on the other side and back stitch a few stitches. Move your clip out of the way. Okay, so now I flip it so that my clip is on the outside, or you can turn it whichever side you want to be the outside. You can turn the clip around on there, if that makes sense, like that. So slide your clip up so that it's close to the seam. And I put it so that the seam is on the back side of the strap, down near the clip. And then I'm just going to top stitch through all layers of the strap right next to that seam. And I just back stitch a few times to reinforce that, and then trim those threads. At that point, let's see. Well, I have the other one that I made, my first video, cut off when I filmed it, so at that point you can just clip it on your D-ring. Alright, when making the adjustable crossbody strap, you'll have two pieces of fabric that are 2 inches wide and 28 inches long. You'll place if you have a long length of fabric and you want to cut this in one piece, then you would just do, what, 54 inches? No, 56 inches. And you'll have one piece that way, or however long you need it. So first you're going to place the two pieces right sides together. They're perpendicular, so it's a 90-degree angle. And you want to sew together at an angle from the top corner of this top piece, the top left corner, to this corner on the bottom piece here. So you'll sew directly along that line. You can use a ruler to mark the line out on the fabric. I'm just going to eyeball it. I'll use a shorter stitch length for this. Okay, and then you'll want to trim that seam allowance down to about 1/4 of an inch. And then when you unfold it, the fabric should look like one continuous piece. So before you trim that, you may want to check to make sure that you sewed it the right way. If you sewed from the wrong corner, then it's not going to lay right. Okay, so I went to the ironing board and I pressed the seam allowance open along that angled seam, and then I pressed the entire strap, fold the whole strap in half lengthwise and press to create a center crease, and then open that back up and fold each of the long raw edges into the center crease and press, and then fold in half again along that original center crease. So now you have one strap that is 1/2 inch wide and really long. So now I'm going to use a longer stitch length and I'm going to top stitch along each long edge So first I am top stitching the edge where there's two folds coming together. And I use a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Oh, and I ran out of bobbin thread. How long ago here? Oh, not too far. All right, let's hang on a minute while I refill my bobbin. All right, my bobbin's refilled. If I was making this bag to sell, I would probably rip out all of the stitching now on the strap and start over, but I'm not, so I'm just going to pick up where it left off and go for it. Okay, so I top stitch down the first side. Trim my threads. And now I'm going to top stitch down the length of the other side. Alright, and I just want to show the reason why we piece the two strap ends together the way that we do is to limit the bulkiness. So since it's at an angle, the two different parts don't meet together, so there's not a bump and it's pretty seamless. Alright, so you will take the strap slide and you're going to, ideally I would iron this, I'm just going to press it. You'll fold the end of the strap over by 1/2 inch and then again by 1 inch, and then move the strap slide into that second crease. So the center bar is there over the second crease, or the second fold. Okay, and I'm going to top stitch along that fold. Okay, and then I'll typically do another line of stitching closer to the hardware. Okay. All right, so now take your strap, and this is the fold side is up. Go all the way to the other end without twisting and slide on one swivel clip. Slide it down close to the strap slide. And then again without twisting, take the other end of your strap, feed it up through the slide and down over the bar in the center where the other part is attached. And here's where you'll double check to make sure that your slide works. I really do prefer the slides that have the not stationary bar in the center, the one that slides. They just work easier, or they're better for wider straps. So these ones work also, it's just a little harder to adjust. So just make sure that it is adjustable so that you know that you assembled it correctly. And then again, making sure that you don't twist anything. Let's see. You want this side to be facing up. And then you'll press under this end 1/2 inch. And then again 1 inch. And slide your other swivel clip onto that end. All right, and then you're going to top stitch across the strap. First, close to the fold. And I stitch and then stitch again, back stitch and then stitch across again, and then back stitch one more time, or however many times you choose to give it a little extra security. You could put a rivet through the strap at the ends if you chose. All right, and then also across one more time close to the hardware. All right, and I prefer the 1/2 inch wide strap for this bag since it's small. If it was a larger bag that you'd be carrying heavier things in, you might want a wider strap. So there's our 1/2 inch wide adjustable strap, and then this one is going to go on my large bag. Hopefully that helped clear up how to make the adjustable strap.